This video is a segment of the Fantasy for Real podcast with links that can be found in the description. Today I'm talking about my quarterback and tight end rankings, or specifically in terms of tight end, where I'm ranking Brock Bowers in regards to the whole field. My quarterback rankings are a little bit chalk, so if you're interested in the more controversial rankings, those are the running back and wide receiver rankings that have been released on the channel the last 2 days. With that said, let's get into it. I love Drake May. I love Jaden Daniels, but feeling more confident every day that Caleb Williams is my quarterback one in this class. It seems to be a consensus opinion that Caleb Williams is the quarterback one in this class, and it seems the number one thing that people who dislike Caleb Williams seem to go after are more of the off-field things, and I don't really have as much of a problem with those simply because the people that I trust to tell me when things are a problem or to hint at things being a problem don't really seem to have a problem with it at all. So basically, when all the nameless accounts on Twitter are the ones that have the biggest problem, no offense to anybody who believes in anything negative about Caleb Williams, but I'm just not someone who has a big issue with the personality myself. I don't let it affect the grade myself, and so that is part of the reason why Caleb Williams is my quarterback one. Moving on to Drake May and Jaden Daniels. If I was doing a one quarterback league, I would probably rank Jaden Daniels higher because of the rushing upside, because I do think the difference in the ceiling and floor outcomes kind of change the story a little bit if you're talking super flex or one quarterback. But my rankings are mostly built for 12-team super flex leagues, and so in that circumstance, Drake May is my quarterback too. Drake May also has significant rushing upside. You don't see it as much in the numbers, but part of that is because, and it's the dumbest statistical change between college and the NFL, that college football takes out sacks as part of a quarterback's rushing yards, which really does skew, or at least make the data really hard to read for what we're trying to do. In NFL terms, in the way that the NFL calculates rushing yards, which does not take out rushing yards for sacks, Drake May had he had 899 rushing yards in his sophomore year. So while he is not quite as mobile as Jaden Daniels, because he's not an explosive rusher, Jaden Daniels offers the opportunity to be an explosive rusher. Drake May is mobile enough, and he represents an archetype a little bit more of what we're looking for ideally, because on the Jaden Daniels side of things, and actually my plan for the next episode is to profile Jaden Daniels in further detail in one of those 10 to 15 minute profiles, but Jaden Daniels did not break out until his 5th year. Now, he did a lot of things well those first 4 years. He was a good college starter, but he was not a great college quarterback, and he was not a great downfield passer in particular. He was just a very good, he was the game manager who had a good arm and was fairly mobile, and then he is physically developed. He has, gone from 175 pounds to about 205 pounds. He's gotten more explosive as a rusher. He's gotten better as a downfield passer, and that's what's really changed, but it took him 5 full years to do that. Drake May finished top 10 in the Heisman voting in his 2nd year. So these same tiers pretty much as most people. J.J. McCarthy also gaining ground, kind of similarly to how he's doing in the market, though for fantasy it seems a little less true, and I talked about J.J. McCarthy. I profiled him in the last episode, but I do believe he's going to be drafted in the top 20 picks. I do think he's going to be right around 7th, 8th, 9th on my personal board, and probably slightly higher than other people. I don't think he's in those top 2 tiers, or however you want to phrase the top 3 quarterbacks, because I don't think he's proven enough yet, just like a lot of other people, but I do see the projectable upside in the traits that make me believe in him enough to put him in that top 10 pick range in a super flex league. And then last tier here, if I was doing tiers for the NFL draft, I would do it slightly differently. But because I'm doing them for fantasy, my non-first round tier that I consider drafting is all the same to me. So I am adding another player here that most people don't have in the exact same tier with these guys, but I'm putting Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., and Spencer Rattler in the same tier. All these guys have some great arm talent, some good things to say about them, but none of them quite get to the first round. Specifically with Nix and Penix, it's just the fact of the matter that with 5 and 6 years of experience, they've gotten to a point that is very impressive, but it is just not quite impressive enough to be in that first round grade for me. For Nix, as much as the NFL has gone away from the deep ball more and more, it still is a concern for me that Nix has one of the lowest average depth targets from a projection perspective in college football. That scares me in the projection of him. And then Michael Penix, more than any other player, that gets projected in the first round, I have concerns with things, just not working at all at the next level, as good as he has potential to be because of how good his arm is and how good he moves in the pocket. When he's knocked off his spot, his accuracy in general is kind of erratic in terms of specific placement of the ball. And when he's knocked off his spot, it seems to get even worse. And you saw that get mitigated a lot at the college level because he had such good wide receivers. And he will have, NFL caliber wide receivers at the next level. But that ball placement is is bordering on a red flag to me. And I haven't even talked about Penix's injury history yet. As someone who went to IU at the same time that Michael Penix was there, he had 4 straight season-ending injuries. He was very talented even at that point, but he does have this big red flag around his career that we can't really judge fairly because we don't know anything about the medicals ourselves, but it is a significant detail. Spencer Rattler improving in how people perceive him off the field, I think that's very important, and he's always had the arm talent. He's a little shorter in stature, but it's important to note that his offensive line situation at South Carolina was not good, and that that's an SEC team, so that's a pretty negative situation to be in. So just a really quick recap: I have Caleb Williams at first, small gap; Drake May and Jaden Daniels, small gap again; JJ McCarthy, and then by far the biggest gap from my first round quarterbacks to my not first round quarterbacks, where I have Bo Nix, Michael Penix Jr., and Spencer Rattler. And then the only thing I wanted to say about tight end, really I could have skipped tight end probably for this specific show, but I wanted to say where the tight end tier, I guess, fits into the big board as a whole, because to me it's just a little bit lower than for a lot of other people, because while I love Brock Bowers, and I love Brock Bowers as a prospect, and I love Brock Bowers as a college football player, I guess that's why I always try to say with Brock Bowers is that, you've gotten to see him be not just one of the best tight ends, but one of the best players in college football the last 3 years, and I get that is why people want to buy into him. This position is different than any other position. Hitting at it has been a complete crapshoot. The most successful archetypes at it have come often later in the draft. And at the end of the day, finishing top 8 does not matter. It only matters when you get into the top 3, the top 5 range, right? Cole Kmet has finished as a top 8 tight end in most scoring formats the last 2 years. But if you do not play in a league with tight end premium or a significant tight end premium, Cole Kmet is not that significant of a tight end. You can compare that to any other position. I know it's obvious, but just to say it, if JJ McCarthy is a top 8 quarterback twice, or if Keon Coleman is a top 8 wide receiver twice, those are smash hits at their current draft price. End of discussion. End of the story. Brock Bowers is not. And so it's just really hard to me. I understand that different people all see this game differently. But to me, I see tight end as just this amazingly tight needle to thread where I understand why I like this player. But it's like I really like him as a shooter, but he's the only guy who has to shoot from 45 feet out, I don't like the idea of betting on the tight end position over profiles of players that I really like who get drafted highly, right? Players like Troy Franklin, players like Jonathan Brooks, players like Trey Benson, players like Jalen Wright even. If these guys go in my top draft capital ranges, which for wide receivers probably 10, 15, 20 picks, depending on the profile of the wide receiver, and for running backs is in the top 50 to 70, 60, 70 picks, depending on the running back again, those guys are going to go over Brock Bowers to me, not just Rome Odunze, because Rome Odunze is definitely going to go over Brock Bowers for me on my big board. So that is a bit of a controversial point because I do have Brock Bowers lower than where he is most often on the market. And that concludes this segment of the Fantasy for Real podcast. If you've enjoyed this podcast or just want to give it a shot, check the links in the description or search for Fantasy for Real on your podcasting app. Thursday's show includes a profile on Jaden Daniels, Ladd McConkey, as well as some over or undervalued players in the NFL game in terms of the aggregates like Keep Trade Cut and Fantasy Calc. That's all I have for today, so take care.